dear brothers and sisters. Indeed, each one of us are blessed to witness this new Islamic year. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower his blessings on us. Tomorrow is Muharram 10, day of Ashura, Hijri 1442. It is highly recommended to fast either 9th and 10th or 10th or 11th. So inshallah, let's get benefit out of it, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our fasting. We are still in pandemic, and for many, for some of us, the pandemics are blessing, but for many it is not. ICN, Alhamdulillah, is working very hard to keep you virtually connected. So one of the initiative out of it is the virtual community dinner. Alhamdulillah, we are trying hard as a committee to bring different speakers to this program. So today we have an interesting topic: promoting wellness and promoting emotional well-being and resilience during this COVID time. It is very important topic to listen and then react accordingly. So I would like to take a few minutes to thank our committee, ICN ICN Community Dinner Speakers Committee, for their hard work and bringing us this kind of different topics and different programs. And also, I would like to thank the sponsors. Brother Ayman, if you can bring the sponsors slide, it would be great. So for this time, our sponsors are Sagar, Zemzem, and Pita and Dirilis Transportation. So Brother Ayman, if you can bring the slide for a minute, that would be great. So I would like to thank our sponsors for this month. So please support our sponsors. So we thank the sponsors for supporting the ICN giveaway with the free gift cards. So inshallah, we will announce the giveaway winners at the end. So please stay back to check out if you have won the giveaway thing. And also tomorrow morning you will receive a survey in your email. So please spend like few minutes filling out the survey so that we can serve you in a better way, inshallah. So with that, I request Brother Kashif Fakhruddin to introduce our guest speakers. Brother Kashif.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope everyone is doing great, and Allah's blessing that He allowed us to experience today's fast. Most of you hopefully had an opportunity to fast today. We hope and pray that may Allah accept the fasting and all the good deeds. With that, I would like to talk about the situation that we are in this pandemic time, and these programs that ICN is offering allows us to continue to be connected. Physically, we are distant, but these programs allow us to continue to connect I would say spiritually and also socially. We have not had any gatherings at the masajid. If you all recall our Friday night community dinners, Alhamdulillah, had a great attendance. All of you come, attend, enjoy the socialization, meet and greet, and the food. So at this time, I would like to acknowledge all the effort of the virtual community dinner programs and the committee. They're really trying their level best so we can get more attendance and have this the important programs to be offered for the community. So for that, the topic that we have today is really very important. We are fortunate to have a committee as well at ICN, Family Support Services, which provides these mental health program and have done it during the last few months as well. So we are again thankful to the committee to coordinate and organize the guest speakers. So today we have two guest speakers. One is Robert Skarsky and Sister Shamim Sufi. So Brother Robert is a licensed clinical social worker. He's been certified and have a 37 years of experience in public health and community mental health at DuPage County Health Department. He has been retired, but is really have been adding a lot of his experience through different programs. He has the certified trainer in mental health, first aid, and youth mental health first aid, and a former trainer as well in the crisis intervention. He's very experienced. He has a master's in social work. So we are really fortunate to have him really taking the time and share his experience with us today. Also, he has been involved and is in the Samara Care Counseling in Naperville, and he consults with the faith communities. So he's a trainer in development of trauma uh, and also have a topic which is risking the connections in faith communities. So again, I welcome Robert Skrosky as a guest speaker today. Would like to introduce also our resident guest speaker, Shamim Sufi. She was born in India and obtained her master's degree in economics, and then later moved here and had a passion in social work. She obtained the master's degree in social work from Warwick University and in various engagements. And she has worked with different agencies, with child welfare, and with the local organization, the Hamdard Center. She's been playing a very active role there, and also been a founding member for our ICN's Family Support Services, which has a team, and you can go onto the ICN website and you can contact, you can reach them via a phone number or send them an email. They will reach out to you and set up an appointment as needed. So again, for us, it is a very important service that ICN offers, and I thank Sister Shamim and the team for offering this valuable service. With that, I welcome both of you, and I hope and pray that those who are attending will benefit with this program. And thank you once again. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll be sharing some slides with you to go along with our talk, and we'll be pulling up the first slide in just a minute.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and New Year to everybody with our Muharram. So today we are going to talk about well-being and resiliency in the time of COVID. Once we actually planned this workshop a year ago, and we were going to do that in 2019, but now because it's so relevant of COVID, so we included COVID in our presentation. Can you move the slide? COVID has become such a relevant for our topic because it affects our well-being, and it allows us, or it impacts us because of its trauma on everybody. So we will start today with definitions to make it easy for everybody to understand the impact of COVID and how we deal with it. Can move on. So now we have to deal with the definition of well-being. Can you increase the slide because I can't read, it's very small writing.
I can read it for you, Shamim. Would you like me to do that? Or I don't know if we can make the slide any bigger. But
I was hoping they will make it a little bigger.
no.
Brother Amen, can you do it a little bigger so I can read it? Okay, you can. You can read it, Robert, for me.
Okay. Basically, well-being is a concept that means that positive emotions and moods are largely present for us, and negative emotions and moods like depression and anxiety are largely absent. And you get a sense of satisfaction with life and a sense of fulfillment, and you're able to function in a very positive manner. And generally, we just judge that our life is going pretty well and we're feeling good about it.
Yes, the well-being is always used in our assessment, like when I'm seeing a client. So it's so important. It's used as a yardstick for basic functioning of people. So that's why well-being is very important, because when we are well, we can function well in our daily life, and we are balanced with our emotions and our physical health. Yeah, move on.
In the next slide, we'll talk a little about how we might want to define mental health. And let's see if we can get the next slide pulled up here. While we're waiting, basically, when we're talking about mental health, it isn't like someone is either mentally healthy or not mentally healthy. It's a continuum. And we can probably all relate to the fact that sometimes in our life, we feel much more able to cope with things and use our innate strengths and abilities than at other times in our life. So the next slide, past well-being, talks a little about mental health. There it is. And basically, mental health can be defined as being able to cope with the normal stresses of life, being able to work productively, and being able to make a contribution to our friends, family, co-workers, and to our community at large. So it's something we all strive for. But as we talk about mental health, the next slide talks a little about what we might think of when we think about COVID-19. What is it? 16, 19, it's COVID-19, I think. That many people feel emotionally overwhelmed by what's happening in our society with the restrictions on our movements and not being able to socialize like we used to. So that event of the pandemic is 1/3 of the definition of what we might call trauma, or something that makes us feeling emotionally overwhelmed. And that event causes an experience which may feel like it's life-threatening, emotionally overwhelming, and that has an effect then on our physical well-being. We may feel a lot of fatigue or anxiety. It may have an effect on our mental well-being. We may find it harder to concentrate. So there are all kinds of, and it may even create a spiritual crisis. We may think to ourselves, am I being punished? Or what is the meaning of this spiritually, that this pandemic is happening in our lives? So it can have many effects in our life that it's worthy to think about, talk about, and get more of a sense of control over how we can cope with it and develop strategies that can help us deal with it. Now, the next slide is a more or less comprehensive view of some of the aspects of trauma, and it's maybe a little hard to read, but you can see there's sort of a tree here with some roots beneath the tree, and then the soil underneath the roots. And there are, go ahead, Shameen.
Robert, I would like to talk about that we have so many different kinds of traumas, and we have gone through different kinds of trauma. So, for example, the hurricanes, the earthquake, the wars, displacement, migration, all kind of things create a lot of trauma in our lives. I mean, even we get married, especially for women, it's very traumatic sometimes because we have to leave our home and go and live with in-laws, and sometimes in-laws are not very nice. So that is a mini trauma for us women. And then there are lots of other traumas in life which make it very hard for people to cope because it creates so much stress in your life. Other examples of trauma are migration, war. For us, people coming from India and Pakistan, there was the biggest trauma was our partition. People can't still forget what they suffered during partition. Some traumas are kept with us because we put them in our subconscious, and then it can create a trigger later in life when we see an event which is very similar to the one which created trauma in our lives. You can talk more, Robert, about other traumas.
Yeah, so there's, the top third there talks about experiences events that may happen, like the death of a parent, or there may be a divorce in the family, or some other kind of event that feels very emotionally overwhelming and threatens our sense of safety to a high degree. And then there, as Shamim pointed out, there are some things that historically may have happened. There may be poor housing, poor education, various other aspects in the environment that can create difficulties. And some of the research is just fascinating about how experiences of trauma like these, there's almost a one-to-one relationship between the more traumatic experiences you have, the more likely it is for you to later on in life experience more depression, more anxiety, more chronic health conditions, even things like heart disease and diabetes will be affected. So it's very important to talk about trauma and talk about ways to build resilience and cope with trauma so that it doesn't predict those kinds of negative outcomes. But if we have enough protective factors that we build into our lives, we can overcome these effects of trauma.
Also, trauma affects different people differently. For example, death of a parent. Some siblings are able to overcome because maybe they are more resilient, and it affects some siblings and they cannot overcome the death of a parent, and it stays with them and it affects their functioning.
That's a very important point. I'm glad you brought that up, Shameen, because what's traumatic for one person might not be traumatic at all for another. So it really depends on the person and their own constitution, so to speak. Now, the next slide talks about what mental health problems are, how we could define those. And again, it's on a continuum, just like mental health. One end of the continuum of anxiety, for example, could be you're just nervous. And at the other end of the continuum, you could have a full-blown anxiety disorder that makes it impossible for you to do your work or go out of the house or whatever other impact the anxiety disorder might have. And we sort of slide up and down that continuum at different points in our life too. In junior high school, or in the middle of a divorce, or in the middle of a very serious illness, our mental health problems may be increased or exacerbated. And then at other times in our life, we may be able to cope in a very easy manner. So it all depends on our situation, and we may have episodes of anxiety or depression, but at other times function perfectly well. The next slide talks a little about how common mental disorders are. And when I say a mental disorder, I mean it's something that significantly affects our ability to work, relate to people, and have activities of daily living that we can perform successfully. And you could see that in any 1 year, isn't this amazing? 18% of adults can be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder that significantly affects their ability to function in life, or 6.8% depression disorder, or 8.1% substance use disorder that may involve alcohol or marijuana or other kinds of substances, painkillers, etc. So, and you may have been reading articles in the paper saying that the pandemic has increased the incidence of anxiety and depression, and people have been turning to substance use more frequently. So it's very important to be aware of these things and be able to give support to members of our religious community when we see signs and symptoms that these things may be developing.
Also, Robert, I have read that domestic violence is on increase because people cannot deal with the stress anymore because of the anxiety and fear of pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very important to be aware of that and see if we can be helpful to people that are in those kinds of situations. Now, the next slide talks about why it might be difficult for people who are experiencing these kinds of mental health problems to reach out for help. Many of you have heard the word stigma in relation to mental health. People tend to have negative attitudes about people who have mental health problems. They may use pejorative, critical terms like, "Oh, they're acting crazy," or other terms like that. And people feel shame because they're feeling that kind of judgment, and because of that shame and stigma, they can then feel very reluctant to reach out and ask for help, to call Shamim and the family support services team, or to reach out for the counseling services that they may really desperately need in this time of stress. So it's very important that we are able to talk openly about. It's very normal for a given percent of our religious community at any given time to be suffering from mental problems, and let's be able to talk about it and ask for help and pray together and support each other. So that's one of the reasons we do educational events like this. Sorry, Shamim, I interrupted.
That's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to give some examples of, because especially in our community, Asian community, there is such a, stigma is prevalent in all communities, but it's much more in our community because these things are not talked about. They don't think we should bring our dirty laundry in front of everybody. So even if they have marital discord or if you have mental illness, they are not going to come out and consult anybody about it. They keep it inside, and that creates much more trauma for them, which makes it harder for them to reach out. I can give you one example where there was a family I was seeing which was from Naperville, but they would come all the way to my Bloomingdale office because they were afraid that they would be seen in my office and others would know that they're seeking some mental health services. So that is the fear is so big for people, and that's why they don't come out.
And oftentimes, religious communities have great success when the leaders of the community talk openly in their addressing the members of the community about, let us keep in our hearts and pray for the people who are struggling with depression and anxiety, and maybe even considering suicide because they lost their job or their family or some great loss in their life. So the more we can talk openly about that in our religious community, it breaks down the stigma and people are more likely to be able to ask for help then.
That's right.
The next slide talks about resilience. So we're starting to talk a little more about how to address and overcome and use our strengths to cope with and take control of our lives when we feel like the pandemic or traumatic experiences are having a bad effect on us. So resilience is defined really as how to adapt well in the face of adversity, how you can bounce back and even grow personally and spiritually and emotionally by confronting and learning to deal with the stresses in our life. And many people talk about how they found a strength they never knew they had when they had to cope with experiences of stress and trauma. So and it's something that Shamim and I have been talking about. The wonderful thing about resilience is you can develop it, you can learn it, you can build up your skills and your coping skills, and it's something you can strengthen and take control of in your life. So it's just not something that you either have it or you don't have it. You can actually develop it. And the next slide is sort of a funny little picture related to resilience. And you can see the little bouncing tail there is like bouncing up on a spring, and it's how well you bounce back. That's what we're talking about with resilience. Not how perfect you are, not how much you achieve in your life, because many people during the pandemic are saying, oh my gosh, I just have more fatigue. It's harder to concentrate. I feel more lonesome. You know, I just don't have the ability to focus. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. But that's not the important thing. The more important thing is that we develop that ability to cope with it and bounce back from the big stresses we're experiencing. And the next slide is a little more detailed. You probably won't be able to read it too well. I'm not sure if these slides will be available to people afterwards, but I think if that can be done, that would be wonderful. And you can see it, there's almost like a compass of many different aspects, and you can't see it really well, but there's little numbers, and more toward the center is lower numbers like 2, 4, 6, and then toward the top is a 10. So you can just go around the compass here and rate yourself on the different qualities that have to do with resilience. Are you realistically optimistic? Do you keep yourself physically fit? Do you have spiritual practices that help you to find a sense of peace and being loved in your life and things like that? I'm not going to go through all of them because we don't have time, but if you have a chance to look at that slide afterwards, you can give yourself a little rating and maybe see where you're kind of weak. And maybe you could even work on that particular aspect of the compass.
That brings us to current trauma, which is the next slide. and that is COVID as a trauma. Can we have that slide now, please?
There's
I
one.
think we can skip this because we have a lot to cover, Robert.
Okay, that sounds fine to me.
Yeah. So COVID as a trauma, this trauma of COVID is very different than any other traumas we have known. It's very unique and it's very ambiguous. And that's why people have different understanding about COVID. And with the news channels and with CDC guidelines, they keep changing. And we don't know where to stand sometime with COVID. So each person is dealing with COVID differently. And we also are very traumatized by COVID because we don't see any end in sight. We don't know how long it's going to be. And also, sometimes the past triggers are, we are affected by past triggers during COVID because trauma, those triggers exacerbate our current functioning of COVID. So people have difficulty dealing with COVID. And then it affects different generations differently. The young people think, oh, COVID cannot touch me. So that's why they don't pay attention to any guidelines. And that's why the increase of COVID increases with young people. And also, we tend to focus more on negative because of the COVID. Let's move to the next slide, how it affects us. COVID creates such a loss in our functioning. We have lost jobs due to COVID. We lose, the most important thing is that we lose control. Our life has changed totally because of COVID. We have lost our way of life. Life is not normal anymore. We have lost jobs. We have lost our loved one. We can't go and see them anymore. And people are suffering because of COVID, also because of finances. People don't have jobs to go to. The parents are suffering because they have to pay more attention because of homeschooling, and our support system is affected. I can't go to a friend and hug her when I feel miserable or I feel in need of support. And that's why we have to deal with losses during COVID. Also, it creates another trauma, which is fear. We were not afraid before. I mean, we have dealt with lots of calamities of life, but it creates so much fear in us that we have to deal with the fear. And fear is the one which challenges our resiliency. Can we have the slide for fear now? It's a very, very strange phenomena which we have never experienced before. We have lots of pandemics and flus and other problems before, but this is very unique. It creates so much fear because we don't know when it's going to end. We don't know how much control we are going to get. We are afraid that it might come and get us anytime. So there's fear of dying. Then there's fear of suffering. Lots of people, we hear stories every day on the news about how people have suffered during COVID and what a miserable death they died because of COVID. People are afraid also of loss of hope. It creates so much dismay in our life that we sometimes lose hope. And there is, as Robert explained, there is a spiritual crisis. People are feeling that there's no God anymore. There's no Allah anymore. How can he see all the suffering and still cannot stop COVID? So some people have their faith shaken up because of COVID. And the last one is that people get very angry and very disappointed how long they can continue to deal with COVID. So we have all those kind of feelings and fears because of COVID. That's why it's so unique in its nature. Next slide, please. So how do we deal with it? Uh, as Robert has already explained, that our answer is the resiliency. That's how we deal with COVID. And there are different ways of dealing with COVID if we increase our resiliency. There are 4 R's, which again you can read later on. There are 4 R's for resiliencies are reframe, release, reconnect, and reclaim, which are all very relevant. Because if we keep thinking COVID as a negative thing and something which we would all lose our faith because of COVID, then we have to reframe our thinking and believe that we would be able to uh, counter COVID and would have a positive life again. Release is recognize and take control. Very important thing is that if we feel that we have no control, that creates helplessness in us. So it's always to remember that we have control over few things and we don't have control over everything. So like we have control how safety, we can manage our safety, how much risk we can take. And that's very important. Reclaim is how we build our lives again, how we express ourselves, how we commit to a brighter future. So most important thing is not to lose hope and keep hoping that this thing is going to pass away because we have faith. And that brings me to, I'm going to skip some of this uh, slides because of the lack of time. But important thing is to find strategies to deal with COVID. Very important is to develop a routine. If we have a routine, then we feel we have more control in our lives. Things on which we don't have control, we leave it to God. But things on which we have control, we can take precaution and lead our life. Important things about resiliency is also to develop our faith. Faith is something which we all know, and especially if we talk about Islamic traditions, we have so many stories of faith by which our paygambars, our saints, all stood firm in the time of difficulties. I mean, just take example of Hazrat Hussein. He sacrificed his life and stood against Yazid and gave his life, but because of his faith, he stood firm. The other example which always resonate with me was the story of Ibrahim and Hajra. Ibrahim took his wife and infant son and left them near Mecca in the desert. And the wife was dismayed by this because he was leaving the child and Hajra alone with very little food and water. And she said, "Are you leaving me here?" And he said, "Yes." And then she asked him, "Why are you leaving me here? Is it because Allah ordered you to do that?" And he said, "Yes." And then she was satisfied by this answer because she knew that Allah is going to help her. So these stories bring strengthen our faith. And that's what we have to go back to strengthen our faith, because our iman is the one which would help us go through this COVID. And we have to always remember to sustain our iman. Robert?
Yeah, Eamon, maybe we can switch to slide 27. Just skip over some things here. Again, if these slides are available to people afterwards, you can read them more in depth. But one of the hope-giving things about our brains, sometimes our brains and our thinking get thrown for a loop by trauma and stress, and we just can't concentrate as well as we used to. But the brain is, more research is showing every year that the brain is very plastic, it's very flexible, it can create new circuits when the old ones don't work anymore, it can reorganize itself. It used to be, I would hear that, well, the brain grows till about age 26 and then it's all downhill from there. But the research is also showing that the brain lifelong has an ability to adapt and be plastic and grow new neurons even at any age. So I thought that was very hope-giving. And then if we skip to slide 30, just on the benefits of time here, more coping strategies, things like finding things that give you pleasure and peace. Sometimes it's almost addictive to watch the news. And unfortunately, there's so much negative news that we can come away with a very depressed feeling after watching the news for an hour or two every day. So make sure you balance that out with things that give you pleasure and peace. Shamim and I were talking the other day about the fact that our brain has a tendency to focus in on the negative. Anything negative that happens in our environment, we immediately look and we sort of pay attention to it, and it's recorded in our memory very clearly. But positive things, our brain, you have to be more proactive about it. Like my wife and I were getting out of the car one night and we saw this beautiful moon up in the sky. And normally I'd have a tendency to just say, oh, look at the nice moon, and go in the house. But I was studying about trauma and stress, and it said that it takes your brain about 20 seconds to record a rich and beautiful experience to help balance out the negative experience that just took a fraction of a second to register itself in our memory. So to create a sense of balance in our life, it's very important to proactively pay attention to positive, beautiful things and focus on them for at least 20 seconds to let them sink in and record themselves in our memories.
And that brings to mindfulness. So we have to pay attention to what's mindfulness. It's like, today is the day I absorb everything which is good and positive around me. So COVID has also brought some good things. I mean, we always talk about negative things about COVID has brought, but it has improved our environment, and there is less use of gas, and there's less pollution. And I've heard and read that there are more birds and more animals coming out because life is more peaceful, there's less noise. People have more time now to connect with families. We never thought that we would be able to, I never thought that I'll be able to call my distant cousin. But in this time of distress, we want to connect with everybody. We don't know when we're going to lose them. So we like connecting with people. We spend more time with our families. Many people are much more peaceful at home because they're working from home now. We have wonderful Ramadan this year because there was no hassle of going to the parties or going out anywhere. And that's why we connected with God and Allah and have more spirituality during Ramadan. So there are good things in COVID too, and we can latch on to good things and stay positive rather than talking about fears and negativity all the time.
Just a humorous story. I belong to a spiritual development group at my church, and I was talking about how part of my development is learning to enjoy sitting on the porch and staring at the beautiful nature and the squirrels and the little rabbits that run around on the porch. I'm too busy to even pay attention to that, but I'm developing a new virtue of porch sitting, so to speak. So, Shamim, should we just jump to the last few slides in the interest of time? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, before we move to last slide, I would like people to use this as an opportunity to do things which we have never done in their life. So this is a time like you can develop all the projects you want to do, start having some plans. Even if you can't travel, we have to use this time very carefully and do things which we never did before. Develop hobbies, learn new skills, things like that.
Maybe we could jump to slide 32 and just remind people about some of the wonderful resources that are available. Family support services is mentioned, and there's a crisis line you can call if you're ever in a mental health crisis. There's a text line, 741-741. You can text. If there's a mistype on there, it should be 741-741 for the text crisis line. And Khalil Center and Hamdard Center and SamariCare. There's lots of good resources in the area here. So just remember, you're not alone. And that's it.
And don't be afraid to reach out. As I said before, don't be afraid of stigma. We are all in this together. And whenever you need help, you can reach out to us anytime.
Thank you, Brother Robert and Sister Shamim. Wonderful and excellent presentation. It was provided well detailed presentation. Thank you so much for that. So we have been looking at the comment section, like questions are pouring in. So we have 8 more minutes left. So we will try to address as much as possible. And the first question, like we were also talking in the back end, the organizers were talking in the back end, like if the guest wanted to send some anonymous questions only to you guys, like because they would have not put in the comments, is there a way they can reach out to you via email? Like if you both can share your email, that would be great.
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe once the program is over, probably tomorrow, we would send a dedicated kind of a mail or text message to the community with both of your email so that the community knows like where to reach you both. Sure, thank you. And with that, let's go back. I mean, I'm reading the comment section now. So there are many good lucks for Sister Shamim and Sister Brother Robert. So people are saying like good luck and Assalamu alaikum. And yeah, okay, there is a question like what constitutes normal stress? Is not stress just stress?
Yeah, I don't, I guess maybe that's varies with the person. A person in a very high pressure job with a very many demands on their life, a normal stress might be a lot higher, and they might be very skilled at coping with it. And for other people that have a more low key lifestyle, it could be a much lower level. And stress, by the way, isn't necessarily always negative. Stress makes us learn, it makes us adapt. It even something joyful like getting married or whatever you can think of for a joyful event could be negatively stressful. On the other hand, negatively stressful things can help us build our strengths and be a challenge. Like my wife, for example, works in a crisis program in Elgin, and she just loves the adrenaline rush of helping people solve their crisis problems. She gets a lot of satisfaction and joy out of that. So that might be terribly stressful for one person, but for another person it isn't.
Actually, stress is the one which keeps us going from one task to another. So the normal basic stress is good for all of us. But when it becomes so bad that it leads to trauma, then that stress is not good. We have to take care of it.
Got it. Thank you, Sister Shamima and Brother Robert. So the next question is, what are the triggering events that could make someone feel a great deal of emotions due to tragic events and then one day not feel many emotions at all when tragic events happen?
Well, one of the things about that question brings to mind for me is that trauma can it activates a part of our brain that is the fight, flight, freeze part of our brain. It may be that we get very argumentative or irritable, and we want to argue with the person who is creating this sense of trauma in us, or even with our family members. We sort of go home and sort of maybe fight with them instead of fighting with the real cause of the stress. Or we could try to freeze and hope it goes away and maybe not feel any emotions at all, or flee and try to run away from the situation. And the other two things that often happen is we look for a rescuer, and that's a wonderful time to turn to our religious tradition and pray and renew our connection to the divine and to Allah, and also to look for allies, counselors, the family support services. Those kinds of things can often be triggered as a coping response.
Also, the triggers are different for different people, and sometimes you might think, why would somebody be triggered for such a small thing, in your opinion? But because if they have a history with that trigger, then that exacerbates the current feelings and emotional well-being. Sometimes triggers could be smell. I mean, you can be triggered by a smell, sometimes by a sight, sometimes by any event which has brought trauma in your past life, and that's why you're triggered in this life.
Got it, sister. Thank you. So the next question is, how do I cope with my feelings?
Well, there's one of the things that brings to mind for me is there are some wonderful sets of skills, some of them, for example, mindfulness skills, where you learn to breathe deeply and calm yourself as your mind is racing. Maybe you're having a lot of fears and negative thoughts about your life and the way it's going, and if you can find a way to calm your body by focusing on your breathing and just letting go of those thoughts and saying to yourself, I'm aware that I have a lot of negative thoughts racing around in my mind. And then just let go of them. Don't engage with those thoughts, because you're engaging instead in your peacefulness of your body while you're breathing in and out very slowly. So that's just one example of some of the skills that we can develop to cope with feelings.
I think it's a follow-up question, because the same person has put that question, like, what if meditation is not working? What is another strategy?
One thing I've often heard at the mental health services of the health department is where we have many psychiatrists. is that the first time medication is not an exact science, and it's kind of trial and error in many ways.
Sorry, was it meditation or medication?
Meditation.
Medication. Okay.
Oh,
Just clarifying. Go ahead, Robert. Go ahead.
So medication, sometimes the doctor has to try different doses of a medicine, different medicines, before they find one that does what it's supposed to. So you have to be patient, and oftentimes the medication takes a while, maybe many weeks sometimes, before the effect is felt. So don't give up on it if the doctor thinks medication is warranted. Oftentimes, if it's just a mild mental health problem or maybe a moderate mental health problem, sometimes just therapy itself, counseling itself is good enough. But if it starts getting to the point where you would really have difficulty functioning without medication, it can be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. It is actually meditation, so I don't want to disturb you when you're answering, because there may be some question related to medication. So I just, stopping you. So can you answer the question in the same way for the medication? Actually, what if medication is not working? What is another strategy?
I think he answered medication, right, Robert?
I think you did medication, actually.
That's almost like a little haiku.
Yeah.
If meditation doesn't work, maybe medication. No, I don't want to make fun of the seriousness of the question.
Got it.
But many practitioners of meditation will tell you that it's a lifelong journey to develop a skill of mindfulness, and it doesn't develop quickly for most people. But there are many other coping skills besides meditation. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, where you can think about, you can analyze your way of thinking about a problem and see if that way of thinking about it could be changed so that you feel better about your life, so that you're happier, and so that you have a different way of coping with things. So you can change your thinking. You can change the feeling of calmness with meditation. There are many, and there's there are types of therapy that help you build on the values and your religious beliefs and traditions to help find more strength in your tradition. So if we had time to go through all those slides, there would have been many more examples of ways to cope besides just meditation.
Got it.
But reframing also helps, like changing how we perceive the problem. So if we always think about negative things, we have to reframe it and turn it into positive. It's like how we see the glass is full, and then the person who's thinking negative always see the glass is only half full. That's a famous example, how we perceive things.
Thank you, Sister Shamim and Robert. So as I said, we will share your contact details with email and as well as the phone number to the community. So if they have any private question, because there is one question typically asking about that privacy of the questions asked. So probably I think they are expecting some contact information from your side. So we will share it to them. So thank you so much. Now, as I said in the starting, we would announce the winners now. Brother Ayman, if you can bring up the winners list, that would be great. Brother Ayman. And we have Brother Shoaib with Shoaib Chadri, one of our board member. So he's also a board liaison of the Family Support Service and Committee. So inshallah, brother, so after we introduce Ayman says computer issue. So after we announce the winners, so Shoaib Bhai will end up with a quick thank note and with a dua. So I think Brother Ayman is having some issues in his computer. So I would just read out the winner's name. So the winners, which I'm reading out now, are Pita and gift card winners for $50 worth. So it's Arun Zafar, Zohra, Tamjid, and then Robert. Hey, Robert, you have won it. Wow.
Oh my God.
You got it, Robert. You got it.
You have to share it with me, Robert.
Yeah, that's right. We got to split. We got to split.
Split.
And Sister Jabin Sheikh and Sister Sabina Sauria and Batul Sheikh. So these are the winners for today for Pita in $50 gift card. And for the Sagat restaurant, this Pita is in Naperville. So we would send you guys an email with all the details how you should redeem this gift card. And for the Sagat, $25 gift card is Musharrafin Khan. So he has won that $25 gift card. And for Zamzam, $25 gift card, Brother Ashraf Wadiwala. So he has won that $25 gift card for Zamzam. So inshallah, all of you, if you are a winner, and then if you are available now, please text us like winner and then like followed by your full name. So it should be winner, W as in uppercase, INNER, winner, and then followed by your full name to 630-426-3335. So it's winner, WINNER, followed by your full name to 630-426-3335. So to accept, once you send your text message, it would be help us. It will help us to recognize you, and we can send you the email. With that, I request Brother Shoaib Qadri to give us a quick thank note and finish it with a dua.
Thank you, Rahman. Thank you. Thank you for you and your team for organizing a wonderful program. And thank you, Sister Shamim and Robert. Very informative session. I wish we could have more time for Q&A. And again, a quick reminder that the Family Support Services has a team of counselors, licensed and professional counselors who can you can reach out to, and privacy is of utmost concern for the committee. And with that, I'd like to end with a dua. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa sallam. Ya Allah, protect us all and our families from calamities. Keep us safe from sickness and tribulations, and help us cope with any sort of stress that we may face during these difficult times, and help us overcome this. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Assalamu alaikum.